Welcome to the Mystic Media channel. I am your host, Rubina Rastaban, aka the Realist Astrologer, and I received quite a few requests to do Phyllis Hyman, and I've been wanting to do a video reading on her chart anyway, so here it is. So Phyllis Hyman is one of my favorite singers, hands down. I grew up listening to Phyllis Hyman. One of my favorite songs is Meet Me on the Moon. Another favorite song of mine of hers is Living All Alone. So she has definitely been a mainstay in my life in terms of music. So I'm very happy and honored to do her video natal chart reading. Now, Phyllis Hyman had a tragic life. She also had a rich and full life in terms of her singing career, but it was also tragic in the fact that she committed suicide. So she was born on July 6, 1949, and she died on June 30th, 1995. Now, about her birth number of 6, that's good for singing, artistry. It points to her jazzy style and beauty. If you can just look at the pictures that I included in the video, you'll see what I'm talking about. It also means that she was very relationship oriented. Basically, she needs others in order to feel whole. This reinforces her Libra South node. So, I'm always talking about the nodes. So, of course, I'm going to be focusing on the nodes in her chart. So, she has her South node in Libra, her North node in Aries. Her life path number is 9, which reinforces that Aries North node. And that deals with being where in this lifetime it's necessary that she be her own person. She needs to be independent. She needs to be courageous. She needs to be a fighter in this lifetime. But also 9 is a number of conflict, and it's also a number of destruction. It can even lead to self-destruction. Now her sun is at the 14th degree of Cancer. 14 brings upsetting changes. Also, Phyllis Hyman was 6 feet tall, and I noticed that Cancer tends to produce people of medium height and above. I guess it's about that shadow thing. Like they can overshadow others, and Cancer is about the shadow. She's also a Sagittarius rising, which I found out in one of her interviews. So she was up on astrology, which is evident with one of the fixed stars in her chart. She has the fixed star Dub on her Pluto, and that can deal with using astrology as a psychoanalytical tool. So she mentioned that she was a Sagittarius rising and that her moon is in Sagittarius, which as soon as I heard that, I was like, yes. So I went to her birth chart in my software and I rectified her birth time to put Sagittarius on the ascendant. And I put her moon, and she also has Chiron conjoined to her moon. I put that in the 12th house because of her mental health issues. So being a Sagittarius rising, that can produce a tall person as well. So yeah, she definitely had that tall statuesque frame. So I put her ascendant at the 12th degree because that 12th degree would reinforce the height, but it would also reinforce the weight issues. So Sagittarius rising can also deal with a person that is large, who is overweight, who is big and tall, or who is just heavy set. So that explains that. So that's why I settled on that 12th degree. So that 12th degree will also reinforce the theme of her being a world traveler through her career. It would also reinforce the theme of her basically having that larger than life persona. But the 12th degree is also a tragic degree because it deals with sacrifice and victimization. Now her sun is in square to Neptune. That could deal with not feeling whole, lacking a strong sense of self, and lacking a healthy self-image. It can bring addictive tendencies. It can cause someone to feel lost. It can deal with feeling isolated, just this sense of isolation. It doesn't matter who you're around. You could be surrounded by family and friends and still feel isolated. This aspect can also deal with her being at the mercy of her record label, because Neptune would deal with the record label and the record industry. So she was signed to Arista, and she was at the mercy of them because they wanted her to be a crossover artist. This is more so dealing with Clive Davis. So that Sun Square Neptune points to her being at the mercy of music executives namely Clive Davis, because he wanted her to be a crossover singer and she wanted to be more about like love ballads, jazzy. He wanted her to compete with Whitney Houston at the time, and that is a horrible thing to put on somebody with the Libra South Node, because they're already comparing themselves to others. So that Sun Square Neptune deals with her being dropped by Arista. And wait a minute, let me see what year that happened, because I took some notes because I watched her Unsung episode over again. I don't think I took the date down when she got dropped by Arista, but basically that was very devastating to her. Also, that Sun Square Neptune is a manifestation of her Libra South Node, because the Libra South Node deals with basically you don't have a strong sense of individuality, and with Sun Square Neptune, that is often a manifestation. So I say, like, it's like asking, who am I without others? And her sun is in square to her Libra South Node and her Aries North Node. So this could deal with relationships that are very challenging, but she can't stand to be alone. But in this lifetime, she needed to stand alone. She needed to be very independent. She needed to be her own person, hence her life path number being 9. Also, like I said, 9 is a number of conflict, and so is the Aries North Node. So people with Aries North Node, it's just your destiny to be in conflict with others, and that can even include physical confrontations, because you are supposed to be a fighter in this lifetime. So her sun being in square to her nodes, since her sun is in Cancer, it points to her taking things way too personally, to the point where she can't even function right, and she's too affected. It points to her being too hypersensitive, lacking a strong sense of self, and lacking strong defense mechanisms. Basically, I see this as this configuration where she feels like the walls are closing in on her, or she might feel like sometimes people are closing in on her, or where she's facing too much pressure to be something she's not. And her being a Cancer, everything is personalized. So if something doesn't feel right to her, she's not going to want to go along with it. And that can create a lot of anxiety within her if she has to do things that she really doesn't want to do, that she doesn't feel in her heart, because she has to, earn a living. Now, what's interesting is her sun is opposed to Eurydice, which is an asteroid that can deal with death. Now, I'll get back to that in a minute. Now, her moon is at the first degree of Sagittarius. It could be at the first degree. She said her moon's in Sagittarius. I would say that it's at the first degree because, number one, it would be conjoined to her ascendant, which exacerbates the weight issues. And also, the first degree pertains to stardom and entertainment, and also being a performer. Her moon is in trine to Venus. Venus is at the 6th degree of Leo. That is good for being a singer, entertainer, performer. It's great for Broadway. And she was on Broadway. She had, and I'll get into that in a minute. She was a leading performer in this Broadway hit called Sophisticated Ladies in the early 80s. That rhymed. But she had a big, rich, sultry voice, and that deals with that moon trine Venus aspect, because the moon is in Sagittarius, so that deals with the big richness, and then Venus rules the voice. So with that combination, that's her, being able to belt out those loud, beautiful notes. With the moon conjoined to her Chiron, when you add that into the mix, that brings exceptional vocal ability. Also, it just basically deals with, again, the sophisticated ladies performances that she put on Broadway, and she was working hard. Like, I think her sister said that she was performing like 48 out of 52 weeks per year, which is very Cancer, because Cancers are very hard workers, and they're tenacious when it comes to things that they want, things that they're striving for. Also, this points to her being a diva, moon trine Venus. Also, it points to her regal look, and she would wear these hats that her personal stylist called crowns, which is at Venus and Leo. Leo is the sign of royalty. And her personal stylist, Cassandra McShepard, basically called her the ultimate diva. I believe that's what she called her. But yeah, she called her the ultimate diva, which she definitely was. I mean, she might have even had, I would say maybe in a past life, she was like this big time opera singer. And you know how a lot of opera singers have, they're big. And I would think that that contributes to having that big voice. So with that Libra South Node, she very well could have been an opera singer in a past life. Let me see what else. Where am I at? So also Moon trine Venus points to the signature look that she has. So if you look at the images that I included in this video, her stylist really, like her stylist was on point in terms of creating that signature look for her with the wide shoulder pads. Like it was extreme, but it was very feminine at the same time, but it was like mixed with a little masculinity. That's that Moon trine Venus in Leo, where Sagittarius and Leo are masculine signs, but the moon is feminine and her sun is in Cancer, which is a feminine sign. So she was able to have that balance because I would say she was what you would call a handsome beauty, but because of that Cancer energy, she also had that delicate look too. She definitely had that Cancer face. Like I always say, I could pick a Cancer out of a crowd of thousands. Like she just had those Cancer dreamy eyes. She had that soft, touchable hair, which is very Cancer in my opinion. She just had that very soft face, the very like inviting, soft, receptive face. That face that looks like, where it shows vulnerability. All right, now here are some of the more challenging aspects she had with her moon. So her moon in Sagittarius wasn't square to her Saturn in Virgo. That's one of the main problems in her life, problematic aspects, I should say. So that is the depression aspect. She was diagnosed with bipolar. So that is the depression part of her bipolar disorder. Also, that points to loneliness. So that points to songs that she sang, like Living All Alone. She also had another song, I Refuse to Be Lonely. Saturn in Virgo brings the theme of mental health into the picture and also eating disorders. So one of her problems was addiction, excess, and that deals with her moon in Sagittarius, her being a Sagittarius rising. So she had excessive tendencies. She would go overboard. So she had an eating disorder in the form of her being an emotional eater, and she will overeat. That's that Sagittarius moon being in square to Saturn and Virgo, pointing to her trying to get control of it and also oftentimes losing control, not having control. This is an aspect that's very hard to gain control over for anyone. All of these afflictions to her moon basically are. So she was dealt a pretty unfortunate hand in this lifetime. Now, her moon is conjoined to Chiron. That can produce unpredictable behaviors. It can point to her being personality disorder, so that contributes to the bipolar disorder. It points to wounds received, perhaps at the hands of her mother. Also, issues with motherhood, issues with the womb. So, also, you can look at Moon square Saturn dealing with the moon, dealing with the womb as well. Perhaps maybe she was unable to get pregnant, or perhaps she had issues with pregnancy. And this is where the Sun opposition Eurydice comes in, because I'm wondering, especially when I take, she also has this other aspect, Mars opposition the asteroid Hebe into account. Hebe deals with children, among other things, and Eurydice deals with death. So when you take those aspects into account, as well as her moon being afflicted, I'm wondering if she either had a miscarriage at one point or she had an abortion, and this contributed to her depressed state. So her being a Cancer, if she did have an abortion, perhaps this is something that she would take to the grave and maybe not tell anybody. But at the same time, she might have beat herself up about it. Now, this is just speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was the case. And this was, like I said, this was one of the contributing factors that really sent her over the deep end. Now, if accurate in terms of my proposed birth time for her putting the ascendant at the 12th degree of Sagittarius, that would put 0 degrees Taurus on her fifth house cusp. And then Venus and Leo ruling her fifth would be in the eighth house. Eighth house, when we're dealing with children, you know, Leo deals with children. That can point to abortion, miscarriage, stillborn, death of a child. So, like I said, this is speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Either, like I said, miscarriage or abortion, and that contributed to her, or it could have just been a inability to have children, or that Mars opposition Hebe could also point to her choosing not to have children because it would impact her career. Like it would take away from her ability to be able to be on the road all the time, because she's a Cancer, and Cancer takes parenthood seriously. So it would be hard for a Cancer to be away from their child, or even to have to take their child on the road and put them through all those changes and stuff. So maybe she made a conscious decision with that Mars opposition Hebe to not have a child, and maybe that led to her decision to have an abortion if at one point she became pregnant. So moving along. Now her moon is in quincunx to Uranus, which can also point to issues with motherhood, issues with her ability to carry a pregnancy to full term. Um, but this can also point to extreme mood swings. So this is another contributing factor to her bipolar disorder, because it can make her emotionally unstable. It could point to serious emotional upsets. This is actually a death quincunx. So this is one of the aspects that led to her choosing to end her life. Also, this is a depersonalization aspect, again, where you may be questioning who you really are. And this is a carryover from her Libra South node. Her Mercury is conjoined to Mars in Gemini, and this could deal with men trying to influence her mind. And again, this is a carryover from her Libra North node, because in past lives she allowed others to influence her to a great degree. However, with this Mercury conjunct Mars in Gemini, men trying to will control over her mind doesn't work out in the long term. It works out in the short term, but not the long term, because she herself is very headstrong, very outspoken, and also conflict oriented due to this conjunction. Now, this conjunction is twofold, and it makes sense because it's Gemini energy. It's twofold because while it attracts men that try to influence her mind, it also helps to propel her towards her Aries North Node, which means that in this lifetime, she does need to embody more of her masculine side, more of her dominant side. She needs to be more conflict oriented. She needs to be more independent. She needs to be more outspoken and stand up for herself. So that Mercury conjoined to Mars helped her to do that. But it was a bit too much, because sometimes aspects that push you towards your North Node can be too much, can be too extreme, can be too much of a good thing, you can say. Now, her Mars ran parallel to the fixed star Hamal, and that can deal with violence, cruelty, brutality. Now, when Mars is taken into account, that could bring self-destructive tendencies. So, here are some quotes that I wrote down that I'll attribute to some of the aspects in her chart. So, her sister said that Phyllis Hyman will always say, I have demons. So that points to several factors in her chart. Um, just having that moon in the 12th house, like I proposed, conjoined to Chiron, squaring Saturn, quincunx Uranus, that can point to her feeling like she's cursed, feeling like she has, demons or whatever. Also, she had Pluto in the 8th, Venus in the 8th. So that can actually deal with, her having some type of demonic attachment, some type of demonic influence that could have pushed her over the edge. So people that have bipolar disorder, sometimes you do have to ask yourself, what is influencing me? What is creating these behaviors in me, these self-destructive tendencies within me? And sometimes it's coming from an outside force, and sometimes that outside force may not be material. It could be spiritual. It could be in the form of a demonic influence. So where her being a Sagittarius rising, that would put Venus and Pluto and Leo in the 8th house. And this can also point to people that come into her life that basically activate her personal demons, or they embody her personal demons. They basically play the role of her personal demons. Also, she had issues with creative control with Clive Davis. That can point to Venus in Leo in the eighth house, because the eighth house deals with situations that aren't really under your full control. That could deal with being influenced by others. So that points to her music. Like I said, she wasn't able to really exercise that creative control like she wanted to when she was with Arista. So that points to that, and that reinforces that Libra South node. Also, competition affected her personality. So that points to, again, Venus and Leo being in the eighth house. Now, her Venus did make those nice trines to Chiron and her moon, even her ascendant. But because Venus is in the eighth house, that alone can really put a hurting on her psyche when she's compared to others, especially because she's a Libra South node. Now, her sister said she wasn't one to just go along to get along. That deals with several factors in her chart. Her Sagittarius moon could join a Chiron, her being a Sagittarius rising, but most importantly, that Mercury could join to Mars and Gemini. And also, like I said, that propelled her towards that Aries North Node, and that's how she was supposed to be. She had a tumultuous marriage with Larry Alexander, that deals with that Libra South node squaring her sun. Sun represents her husband. That means that she wasn't supposed to really be focused on marriage, focused on partnership in this lifetime. That sun squaring the nodes points to any significant man in her life. So that points to she can't put too much stock into a marriage, into a relationship, and she ended up getting a divorce. Her sister also said you just couldn't talk to her anyway, or just tell her what to do. So that's very much, again, that Sagittarius energy, that Mercury could join to Mars in Gemini, Aries North Node. Let me see. Kenny Gamble of Philadelphia International Records, he said she almost had a tear in her voice. And that's that Cancer energy all day. But it's also, if she has moon in the 12th house, that would be that moon in the 12th house. Now, she says she's a Sagittarius rising. Now, if her moon was in the first house, that would put her ascendant at the 0 degree of Sagittarius, with the moon at the 0 degree of Sagittarius. But I propose that it's in the 12th house, her moon in Chiron, again, because of her mental health issues, but also because she was a diva, she was a performer, and she was glamorous. And she was very vulnerable. Let's see. And that could deal with that isolation theme too. So that reinforces that Sun square Neptune. And also her addictive tendencies as well, that 12th house. So her drug of choice was cocaine. And that probably helped her to be, more of a present performer, more on stage, because Cancers can have a hard time always being in the limelight because they need to retreat and be in the comforts of home a lot. So cocaine probably helped her to be more outgoing, helped her to have a, more vibrant persona, more helped her to be more loose and less inhibited. Let me see what else. Oh, there was one time where she was performing and she came out of performance. This was in Philly. And she saw that a guy was selling bootleg t-shirts. And she got out of the limo and started chasing him. So that's that Mercury conjoined to Mars and Gemini, and that conjunctions in her 7th house. So that points to that all day. Also, there was a time where she was performing on stage and she stopped singing because she saw a guy on his phone in the audience. And back then, this was like in the early 90s. So back then, those cell phones were huge. They were like car phones, and they was like 6 inches long. So he was standing out like a sore thumb. So I don't blame her. So she was like, "Excuse me, do you see me singing?" And she even was like, "Give me the phone." So she got on the phone and talked to the chick that he was talking to, and she was like, "Look, I'm trying to do a concert, and first of all, if you really cared about him, you would be here at this concert with him." That was the personality personality that she had. Like, she told it like it was. That's that Mercury conjoining Mars in Gemini in the 7th house. And also that moon in Sagittarius conjoining Chiron. That's that personality where it's like, I'm going to say whatever I want. And also, let me see what else. She broke her foot in 1994. This was when everything was going downhill. So someone in that unsung episode was quoted as saying this was the biggest shift started in 1994, meaning like the biggest shift in terms of her mental health, her going, her having that serious decline in terms of her mental health. So her breaking her foot deals with that Sun square Neptune in her chart. Neptune rules the feet. And that probably was subconscious on her part or unconscious, because cancers will do things on an unconscious level to create situations to get them out of the situation or to make a situation happen or what have you. That unconscious energy with Cancer is very strong. So I would think that she unconsciously broke her foot just so she could check out, just so she could have an excuse, also maybe to like take a lot of painkillers to numb her emotional pain. So she was in extreme emotional pain, and her sun is conjoined to her 8th house cusp, if I'm correct in my assessment about her ascendant being at the 12th degree of Sagittarius. That would put her sun very close to her 8th house cusp at, it would only be 2 degrees away. Now, Regina Bell, who was on tour with her one time, said that she became alarmed when she saw that Phyllis Hyman had 2 books about death on a table. And this was shortly before her death. Now, again, she died on June 30th, 1995. And some of the transits that she was going through on that day was Neptune was in partile aspect to her Mercury. And that could just deal with her just being out of it in terms of her mental state. She could have been under the influence of a lot of drugs. And that points to her committing suicide via taking a lot of sleeping pills. She had first tried to commit suicide back in 1994, I believe. No, 1990. June 1990, she took an overdose of sleeping pills. So she did it again, but she was successful on June 30th of 1995, and that points to Neptune being in quincunx to Mercury. Quincunx is a health aspect. So that points to her overdosing, but that points to her being in a lot of mental turmoil and being like feeling like so much sorrow at the time and feeling so isolated at the time. Chiron was also in semi-square to her Venus, so her feelings were just very raw at the time. Like she couldn't, and she probably couldn't make sense of what she was feeling at the time with that Chiron and semi-square to her Venus. Transiting Mars was squaring her Mars partile, both at the 18th degree. That 18 is a self-destructive degree. It can point to death, and it can be suicidal. So some people were speculating that Phyllis Hyman was murdered, and I wondered at one point too. But seeing her chart and just knowing her history, knowing she had bipolar disorder, I definitely believe she committed suicide. And the fact that she attempted suicide back in 1990, that is a big indicator that she committed suicide, that she wasn't murdered. But she also had Pluto and semi-square to Neptune. She had that transit going down in her chart, and that is one of the death transits. So, and Pluto was hovering over her moon. So it had passed a conjunction with her moon and was retrograde at the time. So it was moving back away from her moon. So it would have came back over her moon once it turned direct. So she was under extreme emotional turmoil at the time. She was under a lot of pressure, probably to just be that big personality that people expected her to be. Death was constantly on her mind during that time. So that speaks to Regina Bell seeing the 2 books about death on the table. So with Pluto returning to her moon, that could deal with her being resurrected. And this is interesting because that leads me to this tarot card that I pulled for her. That could deal with her being resurrected through this album that was released I believe it was a year later, or maybe it was in November of that same year, where it was music that she had recorded that had been unreleased. So they put out another album, so that can a posthumous. Is that how you say it? A posthumous album? Now the interesting thing is, I pulled a card to represent her, and I got the Judgment card, and the Judgment card is a card of death. It's a card of it represents Pluto, and she had Pluto conjoined to Dove, like I said before, and Dove can point to destruction. So she definitely has self-destructive tendencies. Her sister even said it, that she would just go on these self-destructive binges. So Judgment card is a Plutonian card. It's a very heavy card, but it's also a card of rebirth. It's a card where, you're given another chance. So perhaps she's been reincarnated and has been given a better life, being given a better chance in life. But this can also point to her being an old soul, which can mean that in the most recent incarnation she had, she might have just been so tired of dealing with the ups and downs of life, dealing with the disappointments in life, because her soul was old. And it was like she done been through the heartache and pain so much, not just in the current life, but in past lives, because she had a lot of cellular memory, which can point to being a Cancer, because Cancer is the sign of cellular memory. And it was just too much for her to bear. That Judgment card also points to her basically lacking discretion when it comes to just, some of her behaviors. It points to being under evaluation with respect to her mental health. So that's a deep card. But this Judgment card also means that she lived a life of prominence and that she made a big difference in the lives of others. So that's my reading for Phyllis Hyman. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it insightful and enlightening. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Like I said, Phyllis Hyman was one of my favorite singers. She's very near and dear to my heart. I listen to her music quite regularly. So there'll never be another Phyllis Hyman. She was definitely one of a kind. And she was definitely put here to help to ease the lives of others through music and help to have other people relate to heartache and pain and loneliness and all of that stuff, because she definitely embodied that in her music. If you would like a reading, you could go to my website at rabina.com. Peace and many blessings.